Now I put forth a request tonight for your deer stories. Now let me qualify this. This does not mean that you have to have had an experience with a deer. That is merely the example I'm using for this. So your experience may not include a deer. It may include a dog. It may include a friend. It may include any number of things. So it is not restricted to a deer, okay? So I'm going to start by talking about my deer story, or one of my deer stories. And a deer story is, let me give some background, and then I'll go first as an example. There's this little moment in Stand By Me, the movie that came out in the 80s. Gordy, the narrator and protagonist, sitting alone while the other guy is asleep, reading a comic as the sun creeps over the horizon. So this young man is sitting on the railroad tracks, reading a comic book while his cohorts are asleep. Suddenly, a deer enters the frame and pauses in a few feet from Gordy. The two briefly stare at one another before the deer moves on. There's no music on the soundtrack, just the sounds of birds and the quiet noises that signal the deer's movements. The whole encounter takes only a few seconds. This is a coming-of-age story, and the deer's appearance emphasizes how Gordy is forced to grow and change. In a bittersweet and nostalgic film about how time refuses to stand still, this brief scene reminds us of the rare magic moments when it feels like it does. Deer symbolism typically means gentleness, awareness of surroundings, unconditional love, and mindfulness. A deer represents innocence, kindness, grace, and good luck. Seeing a deer is usually a good omen. It means that your spirit guides are watching over you. So I want you to start thinking, or have something in the back of your mind already. What are the moments of your life so important to you that it would be almost impossible for someone else to understand? In this deer scene in this movie, Gordy did not tell his friends what happened, but he shifted energetically. He changed. He began his path in a different direction. So a lot of times we have these moments, we have these experiences, and we never share them with anybody because, quite frankly, the people around us wouldn't understand it. So what is your deer scene? And hint, it doesn't have to have a deer in it. What are some of the moments that you go to when things get tough? When things get tough, when you're starting to feel down or feel a little lonely or feel a little lost, these are the moments that you recall that revive and rejuvenate and energize the body, mind, feel complex. My personal deer scene moment happened when I was hiking the Appalachia Trail, and I was inside the boundaries of the Smoky Mountains National Park, coming up on, I think it's Mount LeConte, which is the highest point of the Appalachia Trail. And I was probably a mile away from the top, from the peak. And I was about a mile away from being able to get off the trail and take a little bit of break and actually see other people for some period of time, because that's where a lot of tourists gather. But I came up on an opening and it was wild because it's just out of the middle of nowhere. It's for miles and miles and miles. It was just woods on one side, mountain on the other, and then that would flip and mountain would be over here and woods would be over here. And I came up on an opening of about a 3 by 3 foot patch of grass. Wasn't much, but grass was pretty rare up at in those mountains at that time and at that height. And so I just decided to take advantage of it. And I set my pack down and I pulled out a pack of cigarettes. I always carry cigarettes with me, and not because I smoke, but because I use the tobacco as prayer. And so I lit up a cigarette and smelled the tobacco burning. I love the smell of tobacco burning. It's just, to me, it means ceremony. It means God. It means creator. It just is a way of getting me shifted into a space of healing and of being. that's my thing, is the smell of tobacco. So I'm standing there and I'm smoking this cigarette, puffing on it, getting the tobacco to burn and getting the smell of the tobacco in the air. And the wind is blowing, the birds are chirping. You can hear the trees as they bend. You can hear the leaves as they move. All my senses were heightened because I was in this magical, mystical experience of standing on the top of the Smoky Mountain, of the Smoky Mountain, and the highest point in the Appalachian Trail. And I was looking back in the back part of the park and noticing the beauty I hadn't seen there before. And the view was spectacular. It was amazing. There was a lake back in that part of the park I didn't even know existed. Later that week, I drove down to that lake and found it. But as I'm standing there on this patch of grass, I take my tobacco, I break it up, and I put it in my hand, and I blow into it. And that's my prayer. And I sprinkled it on the ground. And just as I sprinkled it on the ground, everything went deathly silent. I could not hear the wind. I could not hear the trees rustle. I could not hear the birds chirp. I heard nothing. And it was such a deep, deep silence. I instinctively knew that I was hearing the voice of the Creator. And it was truly magical. I mean, I want to break into tears right now just by sharing this with you. But it was a deeply magical moment. And to give you a little background, I had spent, I don't know, probably by that time, about 12 years working on myself, going on my personal journey, using alternative healing methods to heal my body, to get rid of depression, ADD, bipolar disorder, chronic fatigue syndrome, all those things. And I had spent up to about 12 years at that point. And this was the reason I was in the Smokies. I was down there taking a week vacation before one of the apprentice level trainings was going to go on over in Maggie Valley. So I'd also begun to dabble into vibrational healing and had been exposed to that, had a lot of the codes and frequencies in my field. And I'm sure that that's what triggered all this. But here's the catch. When I came off that trail that day, I was a new person. I was a brand new person. All the work I had done had kind of like culminated in that moment and shifted me. And I moved from living in lack and fear and struggle and all the things that used to be such a major part of my life. And I moved and shifted into power. And I own my power. And I own my personal strength. And I love myself. And sometimes these dear scenes or these moments can be the magic trigger for that. And in this case, it was for me. Now, that was something I haven't shared with many people. And because frankly, most people would not understand what I just said to you. They wouldn't understand how you could stand on the top of a mountain on a 3x3 patch of grass and hear the voice of God. So it's, but I did, and it changed my life. And when I came off that trail, I was a different man.
Love and blessings. Thank you, Jeff, for sharing your dear story. Now we want to hear from you. Please tell us your dear story.